Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and what may be in store for this franchise as Auston Matthews is on the final year of his deal. Yeah, yada yada. We've heard this story before, but what is going to be kind of the mindset here? Now, since we last talked about the Matthews situation, a lot has changed. Brad Treliving is now the GM of the franchise, and I had a lot of concern about, well, could there be some questioning about, a new GM coming in, a little bit of shaky stability? Is there a little more uncertainty for Matthews? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think Brad Treliving is a well-known GM. We know what he's capable of. He did a great job in Calgary. But he was in a situation where a lot of players didn't want to play there. I think this is different in Toronto. This is a franchise that, you look at maybe him learning his mistakes with the Gaudreau and Tkachuk situation. And I think right now, if I'm the Leafs, it has to get to the point where I think the conversation at the time when I made my last video was, if he doesn't sign before July 1st, trade him because that no move kicks in. I think when you're looking at a guy like Matthews, as much as you don't want to say, like, you don't want to be willing to lose him for nothing next year, I think the Leafs are in a spot right now where you have to gauge the value of, is it worth losing him for nothing next year and having him for another cup run? Or are we going to say it's not worth it and we'd rather reap the benefits of trading him before July 1st this year and not worry about losing him next year? It's going to be a really stressful job for Brad Treliving in his first year in Toronto, because if the case is where they do not sign him before July 1st, that full no movement clause kicks in until the end of his contract next summer, a lot of the leverage goes to Matthews. But at the end of the day, for the Leafs, the real leverage here is, you could sign a contract in Arizona. You could sign a contract in Vegas. But Toronto, the ultimate leverage for the Toronto Maple Leafs is, this is the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's only one and only one Toronto Maple Leafs team in the NHL, in the world. That is the ultimate leverage. And if the Leafs are able to use that to their advantage and say, yeah, you could go to Columbus, you could go to Arizona, but that is not the same as playing in Toronto. And you can't convince anybody otherwise. And you also have to remember here, we just saw Cole Caulfield sign the deal he did in Montreal. Yes, there's the state tax, and it's very expensive to live in Canada, absolutely. But the amount of incentive money in terms of sponsorships and things like that they make in Montreal and Ottawa and Toronto might be able to outweigh the state tax and maybe the amount of money that you're making in that franchise. And that was a big incentive for John Tavares when he came to the Leafs, was the sponsorships and things like that you could get in Toronto that you can't necessarily get in a lot of in locations in the United States. It's just not available to you. So I think when you look at this situation here with Matthews, the ultimate leverage for the Maple Leafs, if they can utilize it, is that, hey, you get to play in Toronto, the mecca of hockey, right? What is it called? The Hockey Hall of Fame is in downtown Toronto. You're not going to get that anywhere else. There's certain things about Toronto that if Matthews is willing to make it work and he likes playing in Toronto, they will get the leverage and they will find a way to get this deal done. But it's going to be extremely important here for him, for Brad Treliving, because the precedent will be set. Once they sign this Matthews deal, let's say they're able to get him at $14 million, Marner, everybody else, Marner, Nylander, whoever else comes up through the system and makes money, that will be the precedent. Nobody will make more than Auston Matthews. And you guys have to remember the grim reality here. In the salary cap expansion era and things like that, we've only seen one player in the National Hockey League go to the Stanley Cup final that's making over $10 million. And that's obviously Carey Price back in 2021. And they got beaten 5 games by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Other than that, you've never seen a team with a player making over $10 million get to the Stanley Cup final, let alone win a Stanley Cup. So the philosophy, you have to look at that in the back of your head and think to yourself, is this something that the Leafs really want to do? I think it's worth it. The idea of losing Matthews for nothing next summer will basically blow up the city of Toronto, and it will definitely be a tough look for Brad Treliving, and is now going at what would be his second year in Toronto. But these are things we have to consider and think about. And I think it ultimately is going to lie with, does Auston Matthews fully commit to the Maple Leafs? He's said all the right things in the locker cleanout and things like that. But we're going to really find out here how committed he is to Toronto. Because if he's looking at the best interest of himself and the Leafs, he's going to try to sign that deal as quickly as possible and not let this drag out into next season and ultimately be a distraction for the team next year. No doubt about it. As much as they'll say this isn't a distraction and things like that, it will be. It will be. So I think the sooner they get this done, we're going to see just how committed Auston Matthews is to this city. And they already did that with Kyle Dubas, and they decided, listen, he's kind of mulling things around and, being kind of in and out the door, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and they ultimately got rid of him. What are they going to do with Matthews? We're going to probably find out here in the next 12 months. But let me know what you guys think down below. What do you guys think of the Matthews saga? Do you think it's going to come to a conclusion before July 1st, during the summer? Do you think it's going to be next year when he maybe signs somewhere else in the States? Let me know your guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Peace.